Okay, we'll start in a second. Just trying to get the screen back there we go. And mute everybody. Okay, Hayom Yom, 29 Kislev. The sins of Israel in the time of the Greeks were fraternizing with the Greeks, number one, studying their culture, number two, profaning Shabbos and the holy days, eating treifa, and failing to observe tahara. So the punishment was the spiritual destruction of the sanctuary, meaning the tumadik, the altar and the oil, of course, and the avoida, not the physical destruction, which was a long time later when the Romans destroyed the temple, but this was the spiritual destruction of the sanctuary, and then ultimately leading to death and slavery and exile. Through Tshuva and Mesiras Nefesh came the great, godly, wondrous deliverance, the miracle of Hanukkah. So let's get to the Tanya today and Shabbos. Lessons in Tanya, page 85, 29 Kislev, and classical Tanya, page 16, near the bottom, 29th of Kislev. All right, just to position ourselves here. There are two, I would call them, fundamentals that we should keep in mind as we're now going forward in the next portion of the Tanya. One, saying from the Zohar, that the Torah and the Holy One, blessed be He, are one. So Hashem has given us this vehicle called Torah to connect with His oneness, which without that, and if you thought about it just with seichel, is a totally impossible thing to do. That we who are limited, so limited, in relation to God, but that we could connect with that we who are all about separation, limitation, differentiation, maybe that's the best word, can become one with that which is essentially undifferentiated, unseparated, doesn't compute, right? But He did this. He gave us a Torah, and He says, He and the Torah are one. That's principle number one. The Torah number two, I think we should keep in mind, and that we spoke about yesterday, and it's written in the Tanya. Another one which we did speak about, which is not written in the Tanya that we've been learning so far, is a drush that's brought in Hasidus many times, which is that mitzvah is the language of savta v'chibur. Savta meaning to connect and bind. So the two principles that I want to just have us keep in mind as we now go ahead is that a impossible bridge is built between the finite and the infinite. When God told us that, as expressed in the Zohar, that the Torah, that the way to unify with His unity is through the Torah and the mitzvahs, because mitzvahs is savta v'chibur, we can join ourselves with Him. Okay, with that, we'll start today's, and Shabbos is Tanya, near the bottom of page 16 in the classical Tanya. And since the Torah and the mitzvahs enclose the entire 10 faculties, categories of the godly soul, and all of her limbs from the head to the toe. So when one, number one, learns, engages in Torah, and number two, does mitzvahs, since the Torah and He are one, And since mitzvah is Loshen Savta V'Chibur, connecting together, so one is connected from head to toe with Hashem Mamish, Ve'or Hashem Mamish, and with the light of Hashem Mamish. And the light, and the light of Hashem Mamish, Makifa Umalbisha Mereisha Ba'ad Ragla. And the light of Hashem Mamish, really encompasses and encloses one from the head to toe, from head to toe. Suri Echsa boy says, my rock in whom I take refuge, Pasuk in Tillim. Because Siv, it's also written now, top of page test, like a shield, your will crowns me, encompasses me. Which is God's will and wisdom, which are dressed in, clothed in, his Torah and his mitzvahs. So this is what the Torah and mitzvahs do. They bridge the impossible expanse, the impossible distance between finite and infinite, between multiplicity, huge, unmeasurable multiplicity and singularity, the Torah and mitzvahs. And they do that in a way which is actually invested in us and absorbed within us. Number one, that's called the Or Panimi. That's what it is. We're dressed in it, and it encompasses us in an Or Makif. We're completely enveloped in and penetrated by the Achdus, the singularity of Hashem, in one way and one way only, through His Torah and His mitzvahs. And therefore it said, therefore our sages have said, that is better, literally beautiful, prettier. It's better 1 hour of Shuvah and Masim Taibim in this world, Mikol Chai Olam Haba, than all of the life of the future world up above. Ki Olam Haba, because the world to come, Ushenene Mezib HaShechina, the world to come, one has pleasure from the ray, and what the meaning is only the ray, just the ray of the Shekhinah. We're talking about, we're talking about unity with the singularity of God Himself. Whereas in Olam Haba, all that one gets is a ray from the ray of the Shekhinah. It isn't even a ray of Himself. It's a ray of His manifestation in the sphere of Malchus, which is His Shekhinah. And that's a pleasure that one can actually grasp, masig. Grasp meaning here, hasaga is a word for understanding. You masig something with your bina, with your understanding. And when it comes to understanding, the capability of mind to relate to Hashem, it's impossible for any created being, even the very highest Elyonim, supernal created beings. It's impossible. Only to grasp, one can only grasp a ray of Hashem. That's why it's called the ray of the Shekhinah. However, God Himself, in His glory and in Himself, the Zohar says, no thought. Even the soul, the mind of the soul after the soul is in Olam Haba, cannot grasp Him Himself. One can only grasp a ray of the Shekhinah through the faculty called Hasaga, understanding. No thought can grasp it all. When can you grasp a hold of Him? When can you get a hold of Him? When He encloses Himself in the Torah and the mitzvahs. Then you can grasp it. You can't masig it. You can never masig it. You can't understand. It's beyond our ability to masig, to understand God, no matter how high we are, or no matter how high a being you are, a supernal being. But one can grasp Him. One can hold on to Him. One can hug Him, but not understand Him. And where do we hug Him? Where's the big hug? Savta v'chibur, right? Mitzvah, Russian savta v'chibur. That's where we connect with Him, like holding on to Him. the tefisa behem. V'slabeshes b'hakodesh baruch hu mamish. And the only, I think I skipped the word. You can only hold on to him in the Torah and Mitzvahs. Then you can grasp them, his glory and his atzmos, which is and you're embodied and clothed in Hakadosh Baruch Hu himself, mamish. Why? Because the Raisa b'Kuchabrichu kulachad, as we said at the beginning. Where he has put his singularity, invested his singularity, is in the Torah and the Mitzvahs. Even though the Torah is enclosed in physical things, gashmim, physical, gashmim, physical, low physical things. This is like grasping onto the king, hugging the king. It doesn't make any difference when you're hugging the king, whether the king is enclosed in one garment, or whether the king is enclosed in many garments. Because inside the garments is the king. Likewise, that's you hugging the king. Similarly, when the king hugs you, it's interesting because so far we've been talking about how we relate to him and his singularity through the mitzvahs, Torah and here one, but he's also embracing us. And when it doesn't matter also what he embraces us with his when he hugs us with his arm, even though he may be enclosed in many garments. It is written a pasuk in Shir Hashirim. It says, his right hand embraces me, and his left hand holds up my head. And this embrace, that God embraces us with his very self, is the way he embraces us through Torah, through the Torah. The Torah was given from the right side. The right is the side of extension and giving and flowing. So the right is Hashem embraces us, his right hand, and he lifts up his head. That's the next part of the pasuk in Shir Hashirim. And with his left hand, Smoila Tachas Lareisha, his left hand is under my head. We're going to go on now to Shabbos. But let me pause for a moment. Just any questions or anybody have any comments? And we'll move on. So we're beginning to understand here. We've been given I can say tremendous gift, but it doesn't do justice to it, right? That Hashem has given us his very self in the Torah. Of course, we learn this in the Droshim in Chassidus on the word Anochi itself, right? In the first of the 10 utterances, it says, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, Anochi Hashem Elokeichem. And Anochi is Rosh Tevis, the beginning letters for the words, I have invested my very self in the Torah and the mitzvahs. So that's the gift that he's given us, the ability to grasp the ungraspable in this singular modality of Torah and mitzvahs. Perek Let's explain a little more this language of grasping, holding on. Eliyahu says in the Zohar, thought is not how you grasp him. With the brain, with seichel, you can't embrace him. But we'll see, when your seichel is invested in Torah, you can grasp him, as we'll see. And it calls seichel, shemaskil umasig b'sichla. Any intellect, brain function, which we'll call intellect, when one grasps something with his intellect, is a muskel, some concept. When a person grasps a concept with his power of seichel, seichel taifes es hamuskel. Think about it. When you think about something, your intellect is encompassing that concept. The concept is being sort of held in your brain. Your brain is encompassing the concept. Umakifoi b'sichloi. and surrounds it in your intellect. The hamuskel and the concept, nitfesu mukav, it's grasped and surrounded. And it's enclosed within the seichel, which grasps it and understands it. And also the intellect is enclosed in that concept. At the time that you're actively involved in grasping it, the taifsoi, the seichel, and holding it, grasping it in your seichel, very much, which is giving this as an example. For example, when a person grasps, understands with one's human intellect a halacha, a law in the Mishnah or the Gemara, la ashura, in a straight way, correctly, al buria, and clearly, so one's intellect is grasping and encompassing the idea that you have, is the concept in the Gemara or the Shulchan Aruch or in the Mishnah. The gam sichle malubish, and also the seichel is enclosed in that concept. At the time that you're learning it, you're immersed in it. Your mind is you're holding it in mind, and the concept is being held inside you, right, in your mind. So the halacha zu, this halacha that you're learning, now think about this. What you're reading, this is true, of course, with anything. When you're learning a simple concept, 1 and 1 is 2. I just said it. In order to say it, I had to be thinking about it. My mind had to be encompassing that little concept. Now, when you're thinking halacha and you're grasping halacha, again, back to our famous drush that's written in the Siddur, Al Tikra Halichas El Halachas, he causes all the worlds to go. Halichas Olam Loy, all the worlds operate. Halichas, they go according to halacha. So when your mind is invested in the Torah, your mind is invested in God's wisdom and will. You're invested in the Hachmasi B'Ritzoni Shel HaKodesh Baruch Hu. It was top of page 18 in the classical Tanya. Your mind is invested in God's wisdom and will and wisdom and will. She'ola B'Ritzoni, which is the will that rose up in God's mind. He rose up in God's mind. He's giving an example. You're learning a piece of Gemara. And when you're learning that one of the Tanoim holds this way, one holds that way, this is God expressing his will and his wisdom. So, when Reuben says this, Derek Marshall by way of example, and Shimon, the other guy, his opponent, or the opposite, says the opposite, kach b'kach, the halacha is a psak b'nehim, there is a psak din. The two disagree, and there's a din which falls out of that. Okay, that is it. What is the halacha? The psak din falls out, and the psak din is the resolution of what the argument was between b'nehim kach b'kach, between them, so and so. Even if what they're discussing is something that never will occur, never has occurred, never will occur in the world. That's something that will never come to a court case, come to judgment. Concerning these arguments and claims. Nevertheless, since this is what rose up in God's will and wisdom, in the will and wisdom of the Holy One, blessed be He. And if this one claims this and the other one claims the other, that the din will be so and so. So when a person learns that, when you learn this psak halacha, the halacha harucha b'mishnah or b'gemara, according to the halacha that's spread out in the Mishnah or the Gemara, by poiskim or in the Shulchan Aruch, when you learn Torah, the halacha, you are masig b'teikef u'makif b'sichla. You are grasping, masig, understanding with your mind, and you're holding on to, and makif b'sichla, and encompassing in your intellect, just like when you encompass 1 and 1 equals 2, you're encompassing in your intellect God's Ratzoni v'chachmosai shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the will and wisdom of the Holy One, blessed be He. The leis machshav tefisa beh, which we say not thought can grasp Him. Not even, not you can't grasp Him, you can't even grasp His wisdom. Only and when can you grasp Him and His wisdom and His will? When you grasp what's the way He has enclosed Himself, the Torah and He are one, how He has enclosed Himself and His will and His wisdom in the halachas which are spread out in front of us. And just like when you contemplate any other concept, your seichel is embedded now in God's will and wisdom. And this is a wondrous unity. There's no other unity like this. In other words, when I do 1 and 1 equals 2, this is a property of human intellect. It's the axiom itself, 1 and 1 equals 2, isn't something that is a product of human intellect. But God's will and wisdom is not human intellect. It's God's intellect. And God's intellect, right? No thought can grasp it, except and only when your will and wisdom, when your mind is embedded in His Torah and His mitzvahs, because that's where He has put His essence. He has bridged that gap as only He can do, right, between the infinite and the finite. He's the one who encompasses opposites. He can tolerate and embed opposites, and He does. All duality comes from that singularity. And since He can do that, He does it, and He gives us, thank God, a vehicle for connecting with Him in Himself, as we said on the previous page, in His glory, and in Him Himself, through the Torah and mitzvahs, that we can become lachodim yuchodim mamish, that we can become one and united with Him mamish, b'kol tzad upina, in all directions. So that's, in essence, that's essentially the idea that we have been given 3 garments, machshava, dibur, and maaseh. And of course, they're to get along in the world, right? We need them. But what they're really for, amongst us, particularly amongst the Jewish people, is to, I'm reminding about Moshe, was it a song, I forget his name, he was a guitarist, he passed away. Moshe, yes. He said, why do Jews have long noses? To put them in the 5 books of Moses. And when you put your nose in the 5 books of Moses, you're putting your nose in God Himself. So that's today, then Shabbos is Tanya. Any comments?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you do a mitzvah, that's a mitzvah of, an act, what part of Hashem are you connecting to? You're not connecting to His intellect, right?
Right. Exactly. You are connected to, it's a good question. You're connected with higher than His intellect. You're connected with His ratzon, His will. This is, the mitzvah says, this is what I want, right? I want you to do this. And I'm not even telling you why. So there's no wisdom there. And the wisdom, the ratzon, is the part of the crown, the keser. You're connected with the keser, which is above the seichel. So the seichel is invested in the Torah, and the will, the keser, is invested in the mitzvahs.
So when you learn Torah, you get a double whammy in a sense. You're connecting both with God's intellect and His essence.
Absolutely, because learning Torah is a mitzvah.
Right.
You got it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else? So, any becheins here, guys, before we leave for Shabbos? Rivka, you're still there? Still, it's not quite Shabbos yet in the Holy Land. Any bechein? So what? Come on, that's the title of our class. So what?
I'll give you some. Don't get frustrated. That's my thought that we can't expect to understand Hashem, and we're doing the best we can. And if we do His ratzon by doing what we're told to do, we're accomplishing a tremendous amount. And as much as we understand, we understand as much as we can understand, but we can until we understand, we can't understand. It's sort of like that, I think.
Yeah, and there's and it's frustration, yes, and there's what Rebbe once someone told me, I never heard the Rebbe say this, but he said that the Rebbe said more than once, "I am always happy and I'm always frustrated." Now I'm interpreting that. Happy, why? Because he's a human who's 150% connected with God all the time. Frustrated because ultimately God is infinite and there's always more to be, more distance to travel, right? But the happiness should be there because of the fact that we have our nature, which is the 10 powers, right? The Eser Koichos of the soul, and we have our 3 garments. And in addition to being able to utilize them for the natural, we also have been given the ability to utilize them for the supernatural, above nature. And so we have a tremendous gift here. And, we'll learn in other places that supernatural, that ability to transcend our own nature, so to speak, is largely what we call emunah. But emunah then becomes not just like blind faith, a faith that's really rooted in the garments of our soul. The garment, that's what we learned yesterday. The garments of the soul have an advantage over the soul themselves because they can elevate the soul to a place higher than it was formerly. And we'll explore this more as we get more in the Torah and more into the Tanya. But these garments are not trivialities, like I can take this vest off and put on another one. They're very deep and made and designed, and they're the delivery point where God delivers our ability to grasp them, to get a hold of them.
I have another question.
Okay.
In terms of tefillin, when a man puts on tefillin, by virtue of it being on his brain, does that mean that he's getting some kind of special connection to Hashem's brain?
Yes. We have bar mitzvah kids who've been bar mitzvah recently, or einachlach who've been bar mitzvah recently. Anybody?
Yes. I just had my grandson.
So learn the mimer that he's learned, the bar mitzvah mimer about tefillin. Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to I'm not, saying, hey, I'm not going to answer. Yeah, the answer is absolutely yes. And a thing to notice, it's spoken about quite a bit in Hasidus that the written Torah, the Shanam that says you should put them on your head and on your hand, but it doesn't tell you exactly where, right? So where do we put it? We put it on the skull. On the skull. The skull is the makif. The skull it's not on the brain. And when we say we put them, it says they should be between your eyes, but where you don't put them here. The skull is the crown. The skull. So not only is he connected with Hashem and drawing down a hamshacha from Hashem, but he's drawing it down directly from the makif, from the transcendent level. As I said, this is all more than beautifully explained in the Maimar, the Bar Mitzvah Maimar.
Okay. One of the chaim that I get from this is that even if you don't necessarily always feel the connection when you're doing the mitzvah or learning, it reinforces the understanding that you are still deeply connecting with Hashem. Right. For whatever that means. It means that on a soul level, I guess, or even on a body, on a guf and neshama level, you are making, you keep reinforcing this connection with Hashem.
Right. Okay. Very good. Okay. A good Shabbos, a good Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh, the Shabbos.
Happy Hanukkah. Thank you.
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah. Good Shabbos.
Bye-bye.
Good Shabbos.
What is still?
Enjoy Shabbos. Yeah.